new episode with Joe Rogan.
I started watching that yesterday, but I didn't finish it yet. I'm going to do that today.
Yeah, I haven't finished it either. I was in the middle of it.
Oh, okay, sweet. I think I'm probably about in the middle of it too. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. If you're wondering what we were just talking about, we were talking about the new Joe Rogan podcast with Kyle Kalinske. But I, of course, am Andrew AKA Blind Messiah Mindgasms. And we've got the Woke Centrist, aka Keysats Hatterack Centrist, aka Dusty Cubes, aka Dustin Cubit, who I talk with all the time. And we are going to discuss the third book in the original Dune series by Frank Herbert, Children of Dune, which has all sorts of interesting stuff. Basically, civil war between a brother, a sister, and an aunt for control of the intergalactic throne. Some witches in the form of the Bene Gesserit. It's a blind messiah with Paul AKA Maud Dib from the first two books, and him getting Leto to go on the golden path, through his spice visions, sword fights, possession, the Antilia being possessed by Baron Harkonnen. There's espionage and drug trips, like I was alluding to there, and all sorts of awesome sci-fi fantasy stuff. So, why don't you tell everyone your first impression, general impression, to start off with there, Dusty?
Well, generally, of the first opening trilogy, I would consider this the oddest of the three books,
Yeah,
just
I
by
agree.
what happens in the books. It does keep along that kind of internal dialogue, espionage, like chess game type of narrative that they often do in these books. Because a lot of times the characters are in their own heads
Yeah, exactly.
and
Yeah,
they're planning in their own heads and they have these thought processes that are, to me, it seems like they're playing this political chess game in their head. So
yeah, yeah,
their opponent makes a move and they'll analyze that move in their head. And there's a constant like back and forth between I make a move, I analyze the move, the next move, and then I counter that move with this. It's like a political chess game that gets played every time like two major characters that are pretty much even allies, come against each other and they're having these kind of back and forth political chess games that they're
yeah,
playing.
yeah. That's a cool aspect of the series in general, and we've talked before about how much of an influence this Dune series had on so much sci-fi and fantasy after that, and that's one of the ways all this political scheming and the political chess game and stuff, that's you can see that sort of style copied in Wheel of Time and Game of
Yeah.
Thrones, for example, for sure.
And
And yeah,
especially the book that we're reading, like book 10, there's a lot of like political scheming in,
yeah,
in
there
this
really
in this
is.
book.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking about maybe changing my title to Game of Thrones in Space. Maybe I should do that.
I
Should I do that? I have it.
don't know. I don't know if
I
you
have,
could change it on the fly. I think you could change it before you enter the room, but on the fly, I'm not too sure.
I can change it now too in YouTube Studio, but it might show up as the original title when I share it with people, and then it would show up as the new title when they go to my channel.
Ah,
I have it now as Children of Dune, Civil War for Intergalactic Throne, Blind Messiah, Witches, Possession, Drugs. No, there's no rock and roll. But yeah, there's lots of that like Game of Thrones style political scheming, and it's actually the case that the Game of Thrones style and Wheel of Time style political scheming is more like Dune style political scheming.
right. It's definitely an influence.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah, there's the political scheming. There's the return of some characters. The blind prophet, who we find to come out, is the return of Paul. He becomes like this prophet of a newish sect of religion.
Yeah, that's a really interesting aspect of the book because there are rumors about this new priest, and people don't know whether it's Paul, and then there are legends about whether it's Paul Atreides, and there's sort of a new completely different type of mythology that forms around him, and then Leto gets involved with him through the spice visions and him sending him on the golden path, which is the humanity's greatest chance for survival, which Paul did not want to pursue because I don't remember why exactly he didn't pursue it, because maybe he thought it was too dangerous or too difficult to achieve or something like that. I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, we know that in the very beginning of this particular story, it seems like there's a brewing assassination plot to take out the young, I think they're twins, right?
Yeah,
Um,
Leto and Ganima.
yeah, so there's a kind of a plot to kill them, and they realize this. They go on the run, and while they're out in the wilderness, there's like these assassin tigers or cats that get sent after them.
That's a cool part too when we see Duncan Idaho killing all those awesome tiger things.
So I think they kill one of them. While they're hiding, I believe Leto stabs one of them in the neck. But there's multiple tigers, but he takes one of them out. And then I think his sister is pretty injured and she can't continue. So I think she tells the sister, "Hey, tell everybody that I died, and I'm gonna go off and do my own thing while you go back and stall, like, and misdirect
Right.
um, your sister." Because I believe it's a sister that ends up keeping her captive. I mean, her aunt, which was Paul's sister, right?
Right. Yeah, that's Aaliyah, and then the main espionage I think is Gurney Halleck, who's infiltrated some Fremen, who I think they end up saving Ganima. I don't remember the exact details.
Right, and there's also Duncan who has this relationship with Elena,
Right.
but it's like, and there's also some type of implanted instructions that were given to Duncan Idaho, in which she doesn't know exactly what's going to happen.
Right. Right. Yeah,
But that seems to
there's
happen
a
with every book where he's given some instruction, like some secret instructions that he doesn't know about.
yeah, that's interesting. And and we see as the books go on in time by thousands of years throughout history, we see what like basically what I've alluded to before, that Duncan Idaho is kind of the secret main character of the series because he's
Right.
even in his ghola / clone form. He's the only character who's in all 5 books, and he's in a bunch of the prequels too.
Right, because he starts to become a superpowered, like cloned human. Because I know he gains the abilities of the human calculators. I forgot the term that they use for them.
Oh yeah, I forgot that too.
So he gains those types of abilities, as well as he's a pretty good fighter. And he also becomes a really good political strategist himself.
Yeah,
But yeah, the story and the plot is quite complex. It is not the easiest thing to get into, as there's a
yeah,
lot of I don't know if you want to call it exposition, but there are a lot of points where we have characters just purely talking about political moves.
yeah. Like you were saying, there are a lot of complex threads going on simultaneously. I looked up the plot synopsis on Wikipedia after I read the book to make sure I remembered everything for us to talk about it.
It's because there are some wacky things that happen in the book as well, like Leto's transformation, which was totally unexpected. Like the very first time I read the book, I was like, "What is going on here? This is so weird."
Yeah.
And there's also the issue with the spice.
Mm-hmm.
That at this point in time, I believe Arrakis is becoming more of a world that has an abundance of water.
Right. Yeah, they're doing that terraforming. Yeah, they're doing terraforming and making it more of a hospitable planet.
And at this point, I believe while their spice production is kind of bad, they're also found a way. I forgot the name of the race, but they found a way to make it synthetically.
Oh, the sand trout.
Well, I know that the worms are kind of a dying race on Arrakis at this point.
Yeah, yeah.
They're pretty endangered. But I believe the Benethalax or whatever have created a method of synthetically creating spice. I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly, but I thought that's what was going on in this book, at least, that they were trying to, because of the Arrakis not becoming the environment it used to create spice, they had to synthetically create it. And I believe the synthetically created version of spice is like not even nearly as good as the organic spice. But there's that as well. There's like a kind of change in dynamics in the spice economy.
Definitely. And of course, a main theme throughout all of these books is who controls the spice, and that's part of basically the main seed of all the political chess manipulations. So people scheming for power over the intergalactic throne, and whoever controls the spice controls the intergalactic throne of the Empire.
Right. So it's like lots of plotting, lots of scheming, lots of backstabbing, lots of assassinations. I think the face changers or whatever they're called kind of make a bigger appearance in this book. You can see like the balance of power shifting quite a bit away from the Atriedes in this particular book.
Face dancers, that's what they're called.
Oh, there you go, the face
Yeah.
dancer.
I thought they were called something like really dirty sounding, Dan. And it is close to that. I thought they were. I had in my head, are they the face sitters?
The face sitters. um, yeah, so this book is super strange, like compared to the two before it. And I would have to say that the book three, in my opinion, is not as good as the first two.
Yeah, I would say I would probably agree, because there like we were talking about, there's definitely a complex plot and all of these different threads going on simultaneously, but it still feels like a slower pace than the first two books, and it's less like I guess it's less unique of a plot, because it's kind of more repetitive in some ways. Like, here's another struggle for who controls the spice, except it's with different characters this time, so it's not as unique of a plot. And there's like, because of all of the political chess game stuff, like Game of Thrones style stuff that we were talking about, because there's more of that in this book than the other books. I think that slows it down too. And like you were saying too, there's more weird stuff in this book than there are in the other two books. There's definitely weird stuff in the other two books too, but more in this one, like you said.
So, what do you think of Aaliyah turning evil?
I thought that was an interesting part of the plot, especially since she's like we find out that she's been being possessed by Baron Harkonnen the whole time. I think that's really interesting. And because she's scheming against her own niece and nephew for control of the spice and control of the throne.
Well, she realizes that her niece and nephew um, might be more gifted than she is,
Yeah, eventually, yeah.
and that it becomes an internal family struggle where she wants to hold on to power, but she also feels that her are they her siblings? Who gave birth to these kids, these twins?
I think it was
Was it
was it
Chani?
oh yeah,
Oh,
it must have been
these are
Chani.
her, yeah, these are
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
her niece. This is her niece and
Chani.
nephew.
Yeah, it must be Chani and Paul's kids. Yeah.
So these two kids, um, I believe, have access to the Golden Path, while Alina does not.
Aaliyah.
Aaliyah.
Yeah.
So these have the twins have more access to the prescience, so they're more like a new Paul.
Yeah, that's true. And the prescience is that basically that ability that they can get from the spice to predict the future, basically, or at least predict multiple different possibilities for the future. And the golden path, like you were talking about, is trying to navigate towards the future that has the highest probability of ensuring humanity's survival.
And I believe one of the reasons why Paul came out of favor is because he deviated from the golden path. I believe
Yeah,
there was some choice he made. Because I know in the second book he was making a lot of morally dubious choices because of the golden path, and it
yeah,
seems like he wasn't able to fully handle that. And that's
yeah,
why he
yeah,
kind
for
of
sure.
banished himself out into the middle of the desert.
Yeah, and that's understandable, right? Because he was making this decisions like the biggest one I would say is him making the decision to commit mass genocide of billions of people throughout the galaxy.
Right. So he couldn't handle those decisions. And then we have the emergence of the twins who seem to have a better handling over prescience and the golden path.
Hmm.
As we know in the next book, basically one of them becomes a demigod of sorts.
Yeah,
So, um,
yeah.
he
One
starts
of
to become a
them,
demigod at the end of the book,
yeah.
so it's there. Um, but
And that's that's one of the really fucking weird aspects of book 4, of course, right?
yeah, the whole like what are those sand trout armor? He gets like a sand trout suit of sorts, like
Yeah,
some biological armor. I don't know how to explain it, but it
yeah.
gives him like superpowers.
And that
And
that allows him to live for thousands of years that we see at the end of this book. And then in book 4 he just basically molds himself with a giant sandworm and becomes like basically physically a giant sandworm so he can live for thousands of years.
yeah, it's really strange.
Yeah.
Um, so it seems like they do put a lot of emphasis on um, Duncan's character here in this book because I know that the love story they focus on is between Aaliyah and Duncan, um, and how I think they end up trying to kill each other at some point in this book, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, like it seems like for at least a large portion of the book that not only is Aaliyah scheming against Leto and Ganima, but Leto and Ganima are scheming against each other too.
Yeah, it's like a big family feud almost in this
Yeah,
particular one. And then there are also outside forces working against them as well. Like the Benethalax and those sorts are also working in the shadows to usurp their power as well. And they're also at odds, of course, with the Bene Gesserit. Because it always seems like in these first three books, everybody who's not part of House Atreides has basically come together to plot against House Atreides. That does happen in the second book, and we see a little more of it in this book as well.
yeah, and I like that there's some more world building in this book too.
Right. So we get to see more aspects of this religion that's forming and its influence over the people of. I don't even think they call it Arrakis anymore at this point.
Oh
Are they
yeah,
still calling it Arrakis, or is that in the later books where they kind of changed the name of Dune?
that's a good question. I don't remember either. I'm gonna look this up because I seem to remember something similar. Does the name Arrakis change in Children of Dune? Oh, okay. Arrakis eventually became known as Rakis, while the city of Arrakeen became known simply as Keen, but it didn't say. Arrakis's name just naturally shortened over time from Arrakis to Arrakis. Doesn't say.
When that
Oh,
happens.
yeah, it doesn't say when. Formerly known as Dune and later called Rakis. I'm gonna go to the Wikipedia page here. For Arrakis. Dune, later called Arrakis, blah blah blah. In Dune, blah blah blah. Maybe I should have gone to Wikipedia page for Arrakis. Oh, here now it's referring referring to each specific books. Oh, there we go. By the time of Children of Dune, Atriedes, realizing they're still calling it Arrakis there. He eradicates himself. Yeah, it looks like it's still called Arrakis in book 3.
Okay.
I think it looks like book 4's got Emperor Dune, book 5, Heretics of Dune. It looks like it's still called Arrakis until, I would say, Heretics of Dune or Chapter House Dune. It doesn't say specifically, but it looks like it stays being called Arrakis until book 5 or 6, I think.
Mm,
Yeah, I forgot about
okay.
that. Yeah, it says the name. That's suppose that I was just skimming over that stuff. They were talking about how it's just the name naturally shortening as happens in reality a lot of the time.
Yeah, so there's some interesting things that happen with the plot. So we do see a transformation of the Fremen. I know in this book, like the climate becomes much more hospitable, and still suits are no longer required
Yeah,
to live
that's right
on the
because of
surface.
the terraforming.
So I know we didn't talk about Stilgar actually. He
Oh
becomes
yeah, yeah. He
pretty
becomes more,
important.
yeah, more of a significant character in this book for sure. And he's been there since book one as well, of course, because he was the former leader of the Fremen before Paul beat him in a Knife fight, right?
Right. So I know in this particular book, um, he Stilgar is tasked with protecting Ganima.
Right.
Um, but there are some things that happen with Stilgar in the book. I know ultimately he actually kills Duncan in this
Oh,
book.
I forgot about that. So Duncan has died twice now so far. He dies a lot throughout this theory series and comes back as a ghola multiple times.
Well, it's weird because Duncan like provokes Stilgar on purpose.
Hmm.
So his purpose was to die by the hand of Stilgar.
Yeah, he does. He does that often too. Dies a noble, heroic death.
But I can't quite remember why he did that actually. Like I don't know why he needed to provoke Stilgar into killing him. I think it's because Stilgar didn't want to um, deal with
Wasn't
what was
it
it?
to allow Ganima to escape? I think.
Was that it?
I think it was either to allow I think it was either to allow. Yeah, I think it was to allow Ganymede to escape, if I remember correctly.
Hmm. Well, I know she gets recaptured though.
That's true. Yeah,
Well,
maybe it
anyway, I
wasn't.
know she gets recaptured. I know there's a big confrontation.
Hmm.
Um, then Paul reveals himself, but he also gets killed.
Right.
Um, and then that's when Leto kind of displays his new abilities in front of everybody.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and I know Leto attempts to wrest Harkonnen's control away from Aaliyah,
Hmm.
but he couldn't. And Aaliyah, not wanting to be kept under the control of Harkonnen, chooses suicide.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a bittersweet ending because it looks like she had a flaw, unlike the other, like the. It seems like Alito and Ganima were like the more perfect versions of like their flaws didn't stop them from being possessed by someone like Harkonnen because I know they have the same thing. Like they can also pull on past experiences, past lives from people in their hereditary line. But they didn't have the problem that Aaliyah had with Harkonnen coming
Oh.
back.
Oh. Okay. I forgot about that.
I forgot why this happened with Aaliyah in particular. Um, the only thing I could think of is before Harkonnen like fully came onto the scene, we could already see that she had some jealousy towards her niece and nephew already.
Hmm.
So there was
Yeah.
already kind of a spark that Harkonnen could grab onto um, in order to take control over Aaliyah.
Yeah. And that makes more sense too, because even though she's a relative of Paul Atreides, she's less directly connected to him than Leto and Ganima, of course. And maybe Baron Harkonnen also wants to rule through her because she's less powerful than Leto and Ganima So she would be less of a threat to him if he wanted to manipulate her to rule through him. Or to rule.
Yeah, it gets such a bad state that Aaliyah tries to kill her own mother,
Yeah, definitely.
and she escapes luckily. But um, yeah, she is just out of control. I know there was what was it? There was like this dude that she was screwing too. I forgot his name,
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that too.
and I thought it was like it was out of convenience, and um, it wasn't because she liked the guy. It was because she was trying to gain control or information through the guy.
Right, right. I'm gonna look that up here.
I think his name starts with an F or something. It's like Faradin or something like that.
Um, hmm. Yeah, I'm having trouble finding the answer to that question here. Hmm.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's the
just
guy. Well, it might be him or someone else, but I know she kind of had like some pseudo sex slave in this book.
oh, okay. Yeah, I looked up who does Halia have sex with in Children of Dune, and it's not really coming up with any clear answers to that question.
Yeah, because it's alluded to that she does, but there's not like a scene where it shows them like getting it on. They talk about it, but
Right.
um, it definitely
Oh, is it
happened.
Faradin?
I think that's the
F-A-R.
name of the character.
That's the kid. That's the character's name with S. He's one of the people who witnessed her committing suicide by throwing herself from a high window to her death.
Yeah, I believe that is the guy that she
Okay.
was banging.
Okay. Yeah, I forgot about that aspect. But that's often why people have sex in the Dune series, to manipulate people.
All right. Well, by the end of the book, though, after all the chaos that happens, Leto, because who dies? Like Alina dies.
Aaliyah.
Duncan
Yeah.
is dead. Duncan's
Yeah,
dead.
Duncan's died again.
Um, so like the succession is like now falls on Leto, and he
Exactly.
declares himself like the emperor again. So it's kind
Yeah.
of like picking up where Paul kind of fell off,
Yeah.
because Paul was
Basically.
like the emperor, and then he just couldn't go through with it anymore.
Yeah.
And now Leto is trying to pick up where Paul kind of left things at.
And he's like he seems more powerful than Ganima in this book, and then by the next book, book 4, I'd say he eventually becomes even more powerful than Paul was.
And then he marries his sister.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely some incest and some like bestiality too, like, hey sister, have sex with this sandwort, but then they have that whole thing where you're gonna have sex with this guy instead, and but we can get into that in book 4. I just looked up that
Yeah.
Faradin guy, and he's from House Corrino. I had forgotten that. So one of the other three warring houses for control of the intergalactic throne and control of the spice, along with Harkonnen and House Atreides, of course. So Prince Faradin Corrino, also known by his pen name Harak al-Ada, was the son of Wensica Corrino and the grandson of the deposed Emperor Shaddam Corrino IV. Oh, was it Paul who deposed Emperor Shaddam Corrino? Because I think it
Yeah, at
was.
the end of book 1, yes.
Yeah, yeah, because it was an emperor from House Corrino at the end of book 1. Okay. Faradin was best remembered as being the official scribe of the Atriedes Empire and the oh, there you go, exclusive concubine to Padishah Empress Ganima Atriedes. Oh, so he was Ganima's concubine.
Yeah, so she ends up being like Ganima's sex toy, kind of how like Leto had Jessica, because they weren't married.
Yeah, she was his
Um,
concubine.
so it's kind of like a similar setup there. But yeah, this I know one of the fears that um the problem with the second book is that Paul basically lost his free will when he was this omnipotent kind of prescient being.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's probably one of the reasons why he kind of just like went off into the middle of the desert.
Hmm.
He wanted his own free will back. And also, I think he lost some of his prescience by the end of the book, of the second book as well.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's an interesting theme that you mentioned there too, that they get into a little bit throughout the books is the burden of power. And especially because they have basically so much magic or supernatural powers, it's more of a burden because they have so much more power. So you can see, like, you can understand why Paul wanted to just give up on everything and just go and wander the desert.
And then Leto is going to go follow that path. And then Leto has a different kind of approach because he seems to want to affect, because I believe Paul was not as, didn't have as good of a handle on the prescience as Leto does.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
He's
Paul had blind spots that he couldn't see.
Yeah, yeah, like we talked about before about how even though he basically literally becomes a god or has godlike powers and he can see the future, even he can only see multiple different possible future outcomes. He can't see which one of them is going to happen. He can just see the variety of possible different outcomes and it's going to be one of those. And yeah, you're right. The Leto is better at the prescience with being able to more clearly identify how to follow the golden path too. Yeah, that's true.
So he doesn't have the same issue that Paul has, where Paul felt that he was trapped in the prescience.
Hmm.
And this case, Leto feels that he has more of a command over it and he's not consumed and trapped by that.
Right.
But yes, this particular Dune book is very strange, I thought.
It definitely is.
Just
Yeah.
the end is super weird.
The only part
Um,
that's the only part that's less the only aspects that make it less weird are that there isn't the part where Leto becomes a giant sandworm, and there isn't all that stuff with the going around with the dwarf in book two and that kind of stuff, which I thought was really weird.
I didn't mind the dwarf too much from book two, because he was like a secret assassin as well.
Yeah.
Um, but this book is just how I almost feel like the whole sandworm transformation thing like took some aspects of the series off the rails a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah. It gets kind of
And
weirder as it goes along a little bit in that way.
yeah, it gets back on the rails like after like book five.
Yeah, we were talking before a long time ago about how we both thought I think it was did we both think that book 6 was almost as good as book 1 or was it book 5 that we both thought was almost as good as book 1?
Well, I feel like book five and book six, kind of go into like a more pulpy direction,
Okay.
where there's a big focus on like the space prostitutes and sex and like sex magic and sex powers, like the competing sex powers between the remaining Bene Gesserit and the other group. I forgot the Madre somethings. I forgot what their
Oh,
name.
the honored matres.
Yeah, honored Matres. Like we're basically like super prostitutes.
Yeah,
Uh,
warring factions of super prostitutes.
like book 5 and 6 are less to me less serious than the first 4 books. There's still a lot of the plotting and chess piece moving, but you also have like these two um, factions that are competing against each other that use sex as like their ultimate power.
Hmm.
Because there's some couples of uncomfortable scenes, like there's a child rape scene in one of the other 2
Yeah,
books that is like super weird. I was like,
there's like
man, what is
even
this crap?
they ramp that disturbing shit up even more in especially some of the earlier Dune prequels. I told you about how there's one scene in one of the original Dune trilogy of prequels where there's a scene where a woman gets raped to death by an entire army of guys, which was one of the most disturbing scenes I've ever read.
Oh no, I have not gotten to that book. Like I've gotten the book 6 of the original Frank Herbert books, but I haven't gotten into like any of the prequels or anything yet.
Yeah, when like I mentioned before, once we finish the original 6 books, there are there are tons of different prequel books, and not all of them are that good, but I particularly like 2 of the prequel series. The first one, which is basically there's one from the perspective of, I think it's Paul Atreides' dad.
Uh-huh.
There's one from the perspective of House Corrino, excuse me, around that same time period. And there's one from the perspective of House Harkonnen around that same time period. And there's, for example, we see a lot of the character transformation of Baron Harkonnen and how he actually used to be a skinny and good-looking guy, and
Mm.
how he became this huge fat blob, which is in a different way than you would expect. And I particularly like the prequels even more than that prequel series. I like uh, the Butlerian, the trilogy that's all about the Butlerian Jihad, which they allude to in this original series a lot, right? Which was the original war between AI and humans, which is why in this futuristic science fiction world, humans are basically, it's like a carnal sin to create AI, and there's all this advanced technology, but no one is allowed to create AI.
Mm.
So that trilogy is all about this basically epic war between the humans and AI and how it started. And there are all these awesome battles between like cyborg mechs and people with basically, and like blade masters with basically lightsabers, and people like basically witches against cyborgs and shit, and all sorts of awesome stuff.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But yeah, so this is well, kind of similarly to the other books. This book, it continues the plot and it follows some of the themes that the first 2 books followed with different characters. And there's a time jump and it goes forward by a long period of time. But there's a way bigger jump between book 3 and 4. And then, like the first 2 books, too, it also continues to set things up more for book 4, like we alluded to before, how Leto becomes a giant sandworm so he can live for thousands of years and marries his sister and gets her to have sex with someone else for him. And I don't remember whether Duncan Idaho comes back in that book too. I think he might.
Yep, he does.
Yeah, he does. Okay,
Yep,
yeah.
he
And
he comes back.
yeah, there's definitely a lot of interesting stuff that happens in book 4 too.
If I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken,
So,
I think there's like two Duncan Idahos in the next book.
oh,
Like
is there?
one, I think one gets killed and then it gets sent back, and like a new Duncan Idaho gets sent back, I believe. If I'm not
Oh, okay.
mistaken, I could be wrong.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure now that you mention it, I'm pretty sure that he gets resurrected more times than the number of books in the original series. So I think you might be right about that. Yeah. So yeah, so what were some of the do you remember any more of the other complex or weird aspects of it, or other aspects that you noticed that because make it that one of the reasons that this is a classic sci-fi series? So did you notice other aspects that other series have kind of copied, whether consciously or subconsciously, since then, as we mentioned the Game of Thrones and Wheel of Time political chess game manipulations, for example?
Well, there's a lot of assassination plots
True.
and
Yeah.
um, political scheming. I know basically, I think that's the strong suit of the Dune series, and it's mostly relies on the narrative of the different actors politically scheming against each other. I know there's a little bit of philosophy as well, like
Yeah.
regarding of how do we like philosophy about free will and the choices that people make.
Yeah,
And
and like the moral cost of doing something wrong for the greater good. Like we talked about how Paul stopped being the emperor basically because he couldn't deal with the guilt of mass genociding 40 billion people or however many people it was, and all of those other things he had to do.
right. So I know this isn't like light reading. I know a lot
No.
of people have difficulty approaching any other book than the first book of the series. I've heard people, like one of my friends, just could not get into Dune.
Oh, okay.
He watched the movie, he liked the movie, but the books, he could not get into the books.
Even the
Um,
first one?
yeah, even the first one, he couldn't finish it.
Oh, okay.
Some people just, I understand that some of these political plots are very hard to track, and it's
Yeah,
easy, really easy to get lost in them.
definitely.
But that said, that's kind of the forte of Herbert.
Yeah. Well, and also it's probably easier for you and I to keep track of that sort of thing. And I think you're even better at this than me. But because we've read so much fantasy and sci-fi, and this is sci-fi fantasy, and this is I forgot this is another aspect. Like I mentioned, there's some more really good world building in this book, and you get accustomed to that and all of the complex plot threads that are going on as you read more fantasy in particular, but fantasy and sci-fi. Well, like we mentioned those other series, like Wheel of Time in particular. It's very difficult to keep track of all the different factions and all the characters and all the different plots going on at once.
Yeah, because I'm in the middle of book 10 and I am struggling a little bit. Um, trying to keep and then trying to just figure out the politics of Camelin and everything that's going on there.
Yeah,
It's a little difficult to track.
it
But in
is.
this case, these genres have evolved quite a bit.
Certainly.
And in the newer, more modern versions of sci-fi and fantasy, I think authors are better able to present political machinations in a way that's a little bit easier to digest. Like just thinking of Game of Thrones and the political scheming that happens in there versus Dune. Weird thing about Dune is I feel that the political scheming in Dune is extremely highbrow, but we have this coupled with stuff that is not highbrow, like
That's a
Leto
good
turning
point.
into like a worm monster and um, the sex, like super sex prostitutes in the other books.
Right.
It's almost like you have
Yeah.
these two things paired together. But
That's a really good
in
point because, like I was saying, I've compared it to Game of Thrones and Wheel of Time, but in terms of tone, it's probably somewhere in between Wheel of Time and Game of Thrones because I wouldn't say that it's grimdark, uh, especially in comparison to Game of Thrones. But yeah, that's interesting that the political machinations are more highbrow, and that's more the style of Wheel of Time or something like that, for example. And then there's this kind of more pulpy stuff, like you were saying too, coupled with that, and then also this darker stuff in addition to the weird stuff and the pulpy stuff.
Right, so it's like a weird mismatch of these things, and I know these when these things are juxtaposed to each other, it almost feels like these books have their own tone that's unlike any of these other books that we've read because of how we have these serious subjects and then we have this wackiness with the jumping sandfish man.
Yeah,
Um, but I think the reason that these political schemes are more easily digestible today is because the genre had the chance to evolve. So this is kind of like a first iteration of this. And I'm trying to think if there's like previous books before Herbert, if we had this amount
yeah.
of political scheming going on
He might
in
be like Dune might be the first, at least the first sci-fi fantasy series with major popularity. And yeah, you can tell because it's classic and the genre has had time to evolve, like you were talking about. You can apply that to any genre too. Like, for example, we talk about uh, specifically fantasy a lot, and how Lord of the Rings is a classic example of fantasy, and you
mhm,
can totally see how that genre has evolved so much more since then too. Like how Wheel of
right.
Time starts off with Tolkien tropes and then goes in totally different directions, builds a way more like makes it way more complex and builds a bigger world, and then you get into like the grim dark fantasy, and then you
Hmm.
can get all the way to like Malazan, which has no hero's journey or epic quest or anything like that, but all sorts of magic creatures and stuff like that. And then for sci-fi too, if you're looking at something like Dune or something like Isaac Asimov, especially, is a lot more character driven than Dune in particular. And then you can
Hmm.
see in a lot more modern sci-fi now there's more of an integration of the focusing on the character and the plot as well, and it's not just all the plot like it was with Isaac Asimov. Though I'm not complaining because I love Isaac Asimov books.
Right. So Dune, while we do get into the characters' heads, they're very similar. Like the characters in Dune do not have a whole boatload of personality. Like there's no characters that crack jokes. We don't get to see characters like not on guard all the time. So they're very the book is not focused on the characters, it's focused mainly on the plot. So there's not a whole lot of character development. There is character development. Like I would say the most developed character in the first three um, books was Paul.
Yeah, I would
Like
agree.
even he goes through this complete transformation from the first book to the third book. And I guess Duncan also a little bit, but Duncan, I don't know. For me, I get Howard Rourke vibes from Duncan at times.
Oh, that's interesting. Why?
Yeah, I don't know. He just seems to reply kind of in the same smug way that Howard Rourke replies to people when he's having conversations with them.
Oh, okay.
Like to
Interesting.
me, the Duncan Idaho just seems like a smug kind of asshole in a way. I don't know.
Okay.
It's very hard. I know people love Duncan, but whenever I hear Duncan exchanging words with somebody, he always seems to be the smug one in the conversation.
True. Yeah, I love him because he's a badass. But yeah, that's a good point. He's not a particularly nice guy.
Yeah, so like if we could just make some comparisons to modern writing likes to run the gamut of human emotions better. Like we do get more emotions out of the characters. Like we'll have them interact with other characters. They have banter. Like there is no banter in this book. Characters don't simply talk to each other to get to know each other. Um, that's not how the Dune series works. Like characters aren't revealed through conversations that they've had through each other. The characters get revealed through their own internal dialogues, which is a different dynamic. Like just taking Asimov and trying to compare it with like modern fantasy. Like Asimov, um, like his characters are pretty dry. I know his earlier works, the characters didn't crack jokes or anything of that nature. They're pretty dry individuals. I think that could be said a lot for a lot of the earlier like sci-fi books from that era, where the characters seem more like ideals and not like real people.
Yeah, that you could definitely say that for Dune too.
And it's very difficult to, because I know modern fantasy and sci-fi, they try to write the characters so that they relate to the reader in some form or fashion, or that the reader can relate to particular characters in the story. And that's because the character's flaws almost become the things that are put front, like forward and foremost. It almost seems like these older works, they kind of obscure the character flaws and try to put the character's best traits forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there are definitely just in general in terms of fiction in general, there are more anti-heroes than there used to be, and there seems to be more of an attraction to more realistic and flawed characters. And like we were mentioning before too, there that part of the evolution of fantasy and sci-fi is that both of these genres can be grimdark now, and they can have fully fleshed out characters too. Like, I think a good example of that is the Expanse series, right?
Hmm. Yeah, like the characters are all extremely flawed, yeah, in some form or fashion. I know Holden is like supposed to be the ideal dude, but his ideals often get him in trouble and also mess with the politics of the universe.
Exactly. Yeah.
So they're trying to show you what happens when you get this guy that's always trying to do the right thing, but the right thing isn't always the right thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly the same type of theme that we were talking about in terms of Dune, right? Like Paul and Leto and the moral cost of doing something terrible for the greater good, and sometimes you have to do the wrong thing in order to ultimately lead to the right thing. That's there's still that theme, but it's executed in terms of Holden through the eyes of a character who's much more complex, and he's like, because he's more flawed, I think you buy that just a little bit more.
Yeah, because when we meet Holden, obviously because of his current station and where he's at, he had done something that was less than desirable.
Yeah.
I think he got kicked out of the military or something like that. And they never really elaborated why, but we know that he probably made some bad decisions in the past that haunt him, and he wants to do the right thing moving forward.
Right.
But yeah, I would say that yes, this Dune doesn't really focus on developing the characters too much. They're mostly focused on complex tactical strategy regarding politics.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah,
the main focus.
Especially in
That's
book
the
3,
power
like we were saying.
struggles. Yeah, it's all about power struggles. That's Dune focuses on the power struggles first and foremost.
Yeah.
And
And
then the
that's like,
characters are like the
that's why
secondary to
that's
that.
why I was thinking about how you can compare it to Game of Thrones in particular, except Game of Thrones is way more grimdark, because they both they both really do focus on the power struggles and political machinations and different secret moves in the political chess game, but they just more often include way more dark shit in the Game of Thrones series.
Well, that, and they do put a lot of development in the characters, to make them
True.
lovable or
Yeah, yeah.
hateable.
There definitely is more character development in Game of Thrones / Song of Ice and Fire than there is in Dune, I would say, too. Yeah.
Right. Because we got all of the flawed, every character in Game of Thrones is extremely flawed. Even our favorites like Tyrion, he's extremely flawed. He's a
Certainly.
philanderer. He's brilliant, but he has a chip on his shoulder also.
For sure. Yeah.
And that causes him to make some questionable decisions at times
Definitely. Yeah.
that don't jive with the politics of the world of Ice and Fire.
Definitely. Yeah. The world of Ice and Fire is very harsh and unforgiving.
Right. And he has a heart, and sometimes that gets him in trouble.
Exactly. Yeah. Like when he fell in love with a hooker and then got betrayed by her.
Right. But him doing the right thing sometimes, it works in his favor. Like, he knew that Sansa was under duress, and he didn't want to try to he was like, okay, I have this person who's my wife, but not really my wife. I know she doesn't want to be here, and I'm not going to impose myself on her either.
Yeah. I'm not going to have sex with my wife because she's a teenage virgin, and it would feel very fucking creepy and wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, Dune. It is this book. When was this book written? Like in the 60s, 70s?
I think this one was the 70s. The first one was definitely the 60s at some point. I think this one, yeah, 1976. Oh, that's interesting. The same year the first Star Wars movie came out, and we've talked before too about how like one of the many ways in which Dune is classic and created the genre of sci-fi fantasy. A lot of other sci-fi and fantasy copied many aspects of the Dune series, and Star Wars is certainly one of them.
Right. That's for sure. Dune does have many fantastical elements. It's like the whole Bene Gesserits. I know they try to scientifically explain their abilities in later books. In the early books, they certainly seem fantastical. But
That's
even
true,
then, like
yeah.
it's
And
not
that's another aspect I was thinking of too. This is in terms of sci-fi and fantasy, but fantasy in particular in the Dune series. This is I think this was probably definitely at the point where there were still only soft magic systems like Tolkien, and there wasn't more of a hard magic system like what Brandon Sanderson does yet, I don't think.
right. And then the sci-fi elements are definitely softer in Dune in
Yeah,
comparison to like Asimov,
for
who gets a
sure,
bit
for sure. Yeah.
harder in the science department.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And that's one way that's one thing that's interesting about magic systems is that more harder magic systems like what Brandon Sanderson uses in his books they're more scientific in that way. So in a way, a harder magic system is kind of more science fiction feeling in a sci-fi world.
Right, right.
Yeah, that's
So I
very
would say
interesting.
that Dune is not for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's some people who, like one of my friends, for example, just isn't really into fantasy that much. Some people like I wouldn't say most people I wouldn't say anymore look down on fantasy or science fiction like used to be the case. I don't think many people do that anymore, but some people it just doesn't appeal to them. And I get that. I love these genres, but I get why people would not be interested in them or would be too confused or sometimes people think like if a series is complex enough, like Wheel of Time, for example, in particular, I can understand people not wanting to read that because it's too much work.
Right.
I've talked to my mom before about that, and she says some of these books you read, why do you read them when there's so much work?
So much work.
Yeah,
Ah, because they're interesting.
because people
Um,
create these fascinating and complex and intricate worlds.
yeah, I feel that in the realm of sci-fi and fantasy, that's when people's imaginations are allowed to run amok a bit.
For sure. Yeah.
They don't have to stick to realistic conventions, or as long as you have some good plots and character developments going, and these interesting worlds to explore. Because usually, if you're just writing like a plain old book that takes place in the contemporary time, there's no world building because you already know the worlds that it takes place
Hmm.
in, So there's like this extra step that sci-fi and fantasy writers have to go through in order to create this immersive experience for the readers.
And horror too.
Yeah, horror too also um,
Yeah, that's why I would say
can
they're my
have that as
three
well.
favorite genres because they're so like you have to learn about entirely new created worlds with these totally alien concepts to everyday life, like you know magic and amazing technology and supernatural monsters and all kinds of stuff like that.
Hmm. Hmm. That's good stuff, man.
Definitely. All right.
So
Well,
did you consume this via reading or audiobook?
I listened to this one as an audiobook. Did
Okay.
you?
Audiobook, I've only done Dune via audiobook. I have not
Okay.
read like Dune physically before.
I think when I read the series before, I listened to most of them as audiobooks, but I had a physical copy of the first one, so I read the first one as a physical copy, and then I think I read one or two of them as ebooks because I couldn't find the audiobooks. I think I read maybe book uh, 5 and 6 as ebooks. So I basically did them in like every possible variety of format. But yeah, if you get the next audiobooks in this series, I would listen to them too, as I often do.
I think I have them on file somewhere. I have to
Okay.
take a look. I do know that. I think I have to get the fourth one again, actually. I need to go re-download that one. That was before I started storing my audiobooks.
Very brilliant idea that was.
Yeah, to store them on the cloud. Because there's like so many that I couldn't put these all on my computer. They would just take up way too much space.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm always having to delete older ones from my phones, and I try to just keep the ones that are the most awesome.
Yeah, I have a bunch on my phone. I just put like a new chip in my phone. That's like 256 gig. And I think 150 gigs are just of audiobooks.
Oh, wow, nice.
Yeah, there's like 200 audiobooks on this chip in my phone.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah, it's pretty nice having but recently I've just mainly been listening to Audible audiobooks.
Oh, okay.
As I've been trying to I have like a backlog of Audible audiobooks. And
Credits?
I've been, yeah, I need to use all these credits so that I can just get rid of the service. But
Yeah,
right now I'm just keeping it around because there's this language learning pack that's included with audiobooks, the Audible. And once I get through all of those little language things, I think I'm just going to turn off my subscription because I have like 6 credits and then I have to, because the way it works with Audible is weird. Like some of the books are exclusive to Audible.
yeah, I know.
So I only want to use credits on exclusive books. If the book appears on another platform, then I won't get it. It has to be exclusive to Audible. It has to be that is the only place I can get it. And then I've gotten a few books that are only on Audible, and that's what I'm going to use my credits for. Because I
That makes
believe the
sense.
Malazan books are only on Audible.
Oh, really?
Um, yeah.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Well, it's good that
the
I can get those as ebooks on that archive.org website.
Yeah, and then the Rothfuss books are only on Audible.
That's King Killer.
Yeah, some of David Eddings' books are only on Audible.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
so I'm actually listening to one of them right now called Belgarath the Sorcerer,
Oh, okay.
which is
I
a
have
prequel.
I forget what that one was that I tried that I told you about that I thought was really weird and terrible, but I haven't read that his classic series yet, The Dawn of Prophecy, but I have a bunch of
No,
those
you said
books.
there was another one that you didn't like.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It wasn't that one. It wasn't one in that series. It was a totally different one from the Dawn of Prophecy series that I didn't like. But and I have another series. I have another trilogy of his too. The Blue Sapphire. That's one of the books. I forget what the series is called. Um, wait, was it Elenium? I think there
Yeah,
might be.
Elenium is one of his. So there's Elenium, there's the Belgariad, and there's the Malorian. The
Um,
Belgariad and the
the
Malorian are
Belgariad's the
actually,
probably good one, right?
yeah, Belgariad is like his first fantasy series. And it's pretty, I would call it wholesome fantasy. Wholesome fantasy is just like, okay, anybody could read it. It's not grimdark.
Okay,
People die and stuff, but it doesn't dwell on the details of like well, yeah, people's like guts get split open and stuff like that, but it's not like, it's definitely not grimdark.
okay.
But
Yeah,
this book,
I definitely plan on reading it. Yeah, it looks like that other trilogy that I have, or three or maybe all four of the books it looks like I might have, is the Elenium series. So that's one that I haven't tried. So it must be that third series that I tried that I didn't like. What was it? What did you say it was called?
um, well, it hasn't been the Mandalorian because I think the
Um,
one that you tried was like the Gods series or something like that.
yeah, it was about gods, yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. The Pawn of Prophecy, I think, is the first book in the Belgariad.
Yeah, that's the one that I haven't tried yet too, but I also have physical copies of those books.
Okay, yeah, Belgariad is. I like it. The reason why I like the Belgariad is because the audiobooks are great. The guy that narrates it is phenomenal.
Good.
Um, I don't think I could read it because the audiobooks are that good.
Oh, cool.
Um, I would highly recommend you do the audiobooks. I just love the guy who does the series. He does.
Yeah.
He's like one of those guys that does great voices. You know, like all the characters are instantly recognizable
Okay.
because he has distinct voices for all the characters. Um, and I believe just the character writing in the Belgariad is very good, in my opinion. I just
Okay.
like the dialogue at least. The characters become lovable characters that you care about, at least for me.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in checking it out. Yeah, I mean, if you want to send me the audiobooks, I might get to that sooner than I would the physical copies that I have. I'm
I
also
think
going
I'm.
to pretty soon get into that Ranger's Apprentice series because I just finished yesterday reading uh, book 6 of that Codex Alera series by Jim Butcher, who wrote the Dresden Files. And I thought that last book in particular was really good. So I'll probably start reading those Ranger's Apprentice books that you sent me now that I finished the Codex Alera series.
Yeah, and those books are like really short. They're not like super long. Um, and they're good books. I would because there is an error this author made, and I'm wondering if I should tell you about this error because it might alter the way you read these books.
Like, I might
Um,
get confused and interpret them incorrectly if I don't know.
right, because he doesn't tell you this, so I got confused while I was reading. I think book 7, because one of the books happens out of order. So
Oh,
when I was reading it, I was like, huh? Didn't this stuff happen already? Isn't he already this and that and blah, 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 blah? So I almost think that you should probably read the book out of order, in the order that
oh,
it's written in, because,
oh, okay. Well, what book do you think I should start with then?
well, you should start with, because I think you might have to read book 7 before you read book 5.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Like, and I haven't read book 8, so I don't know if they continue this trend yet.
So book 1 to 4 and then 7 and then 5.
Yeah, let me look at the list of the books because I know,
Okay. Well, I
um,
know for it, I'll just read the first 4 first anyway, and then I'll
book
ask
4
you.
is so far. Book 4 has been my favorite of the ones that he's written.
Oh,
Book
okay.
4 is really good. I like book 4.
Cool. Yeah,
I
I'm
think it's
also
book
going to.
5. Yeah, you want to read book 7 before book 5.
Okay.
Eh,
I'm also going to probably within a few days start book 3 of Malazan.
wow, you're like way ahead of me. I haven't even
Yeah.
started book 2.
I think I'm also going to I think I might this week actually do a spoiler-free review for book 2, Dead House Gates, because
Yeah, I gotta.
I want to do it before the stuff that happens in book 3 gets into my head.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to after I'm done with this Belgariad prequel, I'm gonna probably get back into checking out Malazan again.
I really love Malazan
I've been
so far.
hopping
It's awesome.
around a lot because I've been reading the Ranger's Apprentice. I've been reading some of the Murderbot books, which
Oh,
are
sweet.
really
Do you like those
short.
so far?
Yeah, they're really like entertaining. Like if
Yeah, I really like them too. I wouldn't say they're amazing, but I really like them. I would definitely like we should do podcast series on those at some point.
yeah, it's funny like how Murderbot just thinks humans are dumb.
Yeah,
They make like
yeah,
stupid decisions. He's always commenting
yeah.
on the dumb decisions that humans make. Um, yeah, I've been liking that. So I've been jumping around a lot. That's the problem right now. So I have all these unresolved series that I need to like get back into, and I also want to try out the Codex Alera as well, um, and try that one out. And there's some other Sanderson series that I still need to read, like
Oh, me too. Me too.
the one that's his like sci-fi series, like YA
Oh
sci-fi
yeah.
series.
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about. I'm forgetting the name. Oh yeah, like Skyward is one of them. Yeah,
Right, right.
yeah. Yeah, I
And
definitely
then
want to check those out too.
we got to come together and talk about Bounds of Morning sometime, so
Yeah,
that we
yeah, the next time that you and Tristram and I talk on my channel, we've got to talk about Bands of Morning,
yeah,
book three of Mistborn Era 2, especially since Lost Metal came out recently. I'm thinking about whether I might do somewhat spoiler-free review or something like that before we talk about it too, but I'm not sure I'm not sure of a way to do a spoiler-free review.
yeah, that would be really difficult.
Yeah.
Like for that in particular, because it's like I think spoiler-free reviews are easiest on like the first books of a series.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because there's not much you can do. Like the only thing you can talk about is the writer's writing style, the world building, the character development, but you can't really get into the plot details. Um, and there's just so much happening in the Lost Metal.
Yeah.
Like all the cool stuff in Lost Metal is all the stuff that's hidden behind spoilers.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely, definitely. But yeah, we
Um,
definitely have to talk about that soon too.
yeah,
Yeah.
did that one? Did you get emotional from like, the character's death in that?
Yeah, I was sad about it. I
Yeah, I
wouldn't
was too.
yeah. I saw a few interesting conversations about how some people in the fandom don't really care because there's so many like woke anti-Wayne people, which really annoys me.
Oh, I think yeah, those people are super annoying.
Yeah.
I hate people that same thing with people who are on the other side of the spectrum that do the same, like, oh, this book is woke, da 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 da, and then the
Yeah, if
people
there's
who are
the
like, this book is not woke enough, da 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 da
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
da.
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
basically, I don't like those types of critiques. I find them completely annoying and useless.
exactly. Yeah, you and I talked about that before, yeah, and with Tristram too, in terms of Rings of Power. And I was talking about that with Daniele Bolelli when I recently did that podcast with him where we were comparing Rings of Power and House of the Dragon.
Well, I think what you guys basically just said is the basic overview is that it was badly written.
Yeah, it was a badly written show. And it wasn't bad because it was woke. It was bad because it was poorly written.
Right. And they tried to basically Rings of Power tried to cover up their writing by making it super flashy and production heavy.
Yeah.
Um, which basically, if it didn't have that aspect to it, it wouldn't have been a mediocre show. It would have been less than mediocre.
Yeah. Yeah, for
But
sure.
because they spent a lot of money on visuals, it ends up kind of falling into the, middle grade, whereas it could have really suffered if they didn't
Yeah.
have that big budget that they had.
Yeah, Daniele liked it even less than I did. I think he said he gave it
Yeah,
like a
he didn't
three
like
out
it. He
of
didn't
ten or
even
something.
finish
Yeah.
it. He didn't even
Yeah, he said
finish
he was
it.
like fast forwarding through a lot of the end of it. Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, I caught that interview you did on the Rings of Power. I thought it was pretty funny.
yeah. It was
Like,
fun to talk with him about it because he and I were
um,
talking a little bit with each other's every once in a while as
mhm,
as the shows were airing, and
right.
basically having similar thoughts. So I thought it would be fun to do that.
Yeah, that was pretty fun. Fun talk that you guys had.
Yeah,
So, are we gonna rate this book?
yeah. So Children of Dune. I think I don't remember. I think I gave it 3 stars when I reread it on Goodreads recently. Pretty sure I gave book 1 maybe 5 stars and book 2 maybe 4 stars.
Mm.
Yeah, what about you?
I probably gave Children of Dune, if I can remember, probably 3. Um, it was okay. It wasn't amazing. Um, but I thought it was an okay entry. Like it didn't offend me. It wasn't amazing. I think the problem is I really do like the first book,
Me too.
and in comparison to the first book, it doesn't quite do it for me. Um, the first book was just this is a fresh, new type of writing style that I didn't have any um, experience with. And then Paul was a super interesting character that I kind of liked. And we got to see his origin story and his evolution. And it seemed much more of a grand, all encompassing story.
Yeah.
Um, this one is very narrow and focused um, on a particular set of characters and a particular time period,
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
which is a little bit different. And I don't know, I thought Paul's journey was a little bit more interesting because there was so much new content and ideas that were given to us. There's not a whole lot of new ideas. Like there is so much world building in the very first book, a
Certainly.
ton, a massive amount of world building, and then I feel like that dies off a lot in the subsequent 2 books. Like it'd be nice if they got into, oh yeah, there's this Butlerian jihad. Let's talk a little bit more about that, and how did the empire happen, or
Yeah.
what's the
Well, I have
background on some of these
his son had
factions.
we had to everyone had to wait until his son wrote an entire prequel trilogy about it decades later.
Right. But yeah, I thought this book didn't hit as hard as that first book. Um, it was a continuation of the story, but even then, as far as like new elements of the universe, I guess what we have the trout, those fish that turned
Hmm.
Toledo into superhuman. But yeah, in this case, I did give this 3 stars. It looks like you gave it 3 stars as well.
I did. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's definitely not a bad book, definitely good, definitely worth reading. And I would say, and I'm sure you agree with me, it's definitely worth continuing on to book 4 because it gets very interesting still, and it's definitely worth reading the whole series. And yeah, definitely not good as book 1, but still very good and not bad and worth reading.
Yeah, what's weird is I'm looking at my Dune like book reading list, and it says I haven't read book 5 and 6. I definitely have.
Maybe you forgot
Uh,
to put
maybe
them
I
on
forgot to
Goodreads.
like add it. Yeah, I probably forgot to add both of them.
Yeah.
But Emperor Dune, I think I gave the least amount of stars out of the
Yeah,
ones
I
I
don't
read. That's
remember.
my least favorite.
I think the if I remember correctly, I think the first time I read the series, I liked the second one the least, and I think I might have liked the fourth one the least after the second one, but I don't remember for sure.
Yeah, when I rated it, I guess I gave book two 4 stars. I don't think after did I give that after my second reread? I don't know. I
I'm
have
not
to look
sure.
into that because that doesn't sound right to me. I don't think I would have given book two 4 stars.
I definitely liked book two way more in my reread than I did in the first read. I'm pretty sure
Oh
I
yeah,
gave
the
that four
first read
stars
I
this
didn't like
time.
as much. Yeah, second read on book two I liked. I did enjoy it more. Maybe that's why I gave it an upgrade. I think I probably gave it 3 the first time, and I probably gave it another star after that.
Yeah, I probably did that too. All right.
Hmm.
Well, thanks for talking, man. This was fun as always. And yeah, looking forward to discuss reading and discussing book four at some point in the near future too. And so yeah, for my channel, the next one, do you still want to talk about that movie Fat Man next week, or do you think it's too late because it's too long after Christmas? Do you think it
No, I
matters?
think we should probably just talk about it for sure. Like,
Sweet. All
is this?
right.
I thought it was I call it a grim dark Christmas tale.
Yeah, I thought it was really good, really interesting. All
I was
right,
like,
yeah,
this is
let's
what
talk
would
about.
happen if Santa was like a real person and had to deal with like real problems.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I like that movie. All right, yeah, let's talk about that next week then. And
All right.
so our next week, oh wait, no, tomorrow slash today possibly we're or if not, then next week we're gonna talk about season one of Arcane on your channel, right?
Yeah, we can. Is tomorrow? If you're game for tomorrow, we could do it tomorrow. If not, next week is fine.
All right, cool. All
Yeah,
right.
Arcane, I really love that. It was
Yeah, I'm glad you suggested that to me, man. That's definitely a really good series. I'm glad that I watched it.
yeah, major freaking cliffhanger at that end, man. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
holy crap, I
Mm-hmm.
can't wait till the second series comes
Yeah,
out.
me neither. Me
And
neither.
it's all based off of a video game, apparently.
Yeah, I've never played League of Legends. Have you?
I've played the game, but the show has like almost zero resemblance to it.
Oh, okay.
Like it's unrecognizable because the game is pretty simplistic. It's not like there's no plot, there's no story. It's just kind of like this multiplayer game that people play. But
Okay.
this is like, wow, this is like nothing like the game at all. So I wonder if they're ever going to
Okay.
incorporate like the what happens in the game with this, but it doesn't seem like they are. I don't think they need to.
They have a really great plot and characters so far without it.
Yeah, yeah, it's very like interesting. I wonder if there's probably conservatives who think it's woke because main character is like a lesbian. Um, who knows? I haven't
That's
heard.
interesting.
The only thing I've only heard good things about
Yeah.
this series.
I
I
wouldn't
think
say
it
it's
got
I wouldn't
nominated
say
for
it's
like
woke.
awards and stuff.
It's not like cringy in your face, like, oh, I have it so hard because I'm a woman or anything like that. I wouldn't say it's woke.
Yeah, the main characters, like the characters that they focus on, are mainly like if you want to talk about the sisters, like I would say they're the main characters of the show.
Yeah, I would too.
Um, and then you have the secondary characters, and then it's definitely sci-fi fantasy
Yeah, that's awesome.
because
Yeah.
it's like there's magic in the world, but they're trying to scientifically derive magic and figure it out from the science.
Yeah.
Um,
They're trying to use technology to harness the magic and control it. It's really
all
fascinating.
right, I guess it's kind of like I don't know. It's steamish punk, but not much steam going on.
Yeah,
I
I
don't know
thought
how to
that
explain
too. It's kind of like a little bit steampunkish at times. Yeah.
Yeah, they got airships and things, and they still use swords, and there's guns, but you still have people using like melee weapons too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's
definitely.
interesting. I liked it. After episode 3, I was completely hooked. I like the
Me
villains. The
too.
villains are super complex and multi-dimensional.
Definitely.
Like even the villain, I was like, I didn't really consider him a villain. It's weird, you
Yeah,
know.
he's like a very sympathetic villain in some ways. Yeah.
Right. Like
Yeah.
sometimes his morals weren't all that great, but his cause was pretty just.
Yeah.
And he happens to like do a really good thing at the end of the series.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
But
yeah, it's a very morally complex story.
definitely, definitely. All right. Yeah, we'll get into that in a lot more detail on your channel when we talk about it. And yeah, so everyone check that out on Dusty's channel, Woke Centrist. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching. Look forward to our discussion on book 4 of the Dune series, God Emperor of Dune, I believe it's called. And
Hmm.
yeah, look forward to also next week, the next one with Dusty and I, like we were talking about. We'll be talking about Batman, the movie in which Mel Gibson plays a badass killer Santa Claus, basically. So, and a kid sends an assassin after him. So yeah, it's a really awesome movie. So check out that too. And yeah, everyone subscribe to the channel, share this everywhere, click that notification button to be notified when I come out with new videos. Like I said, I think this week I might try to do a spoiler-free review for Malazan Book Due Dead House Gates, or if not this week, then next week. And yeah, check out that podcast I did with Daniele Bolelli about Rings of Power versus House of the Dragon. And like I always say, oh yeah, check out my Patreon page. Link is in the description as always. And like I always say, I love you all, keeping the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and grooves in the heart. And Dune is an awesome series. You should read it. All right. Thanks, everyone, again. And anything else you want to say before we end it there, Dusty?
Yeah, I'll just say I will no longer be using my outro because of the algorithm.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, I've been curtailing my cursing because I don't want your stuff to get suppressed, and I don't want my stuff to get suppressed. So
Okay.
I just
I
don't
kind
curse
of did,
anymore. It's free.
I kind of did that last time I talked with Daniele Bolelli too. I just went back to my old outro, just saying adios until next time, everyone, and not saying
What
what I
we
was
used
saying.
to say before the censors came out and started messing with people who like to curse.
Yeah,
Because I know even
exactly.
Kyle Kalinske has like bleeps on his videos now.
Oh, he does?
Yeah, he bleeps himself now. So I was like, okay,
Yeah,
that's interesting.
yeah. All right.
All
Well,
right, man. Yep,
th-
everything's good. Love to chat with you, and I'll see you next time.
all right. Thanks. Yeah, always fun, man. And thanks again, everyone, for watching. And adios until next time.
Toodaloo.